Welcome back, guys. This is another installation of Let's Talk Gear. Today we're going to be talking about something that sometimes some people take for granted. Sometimes guys are very aware and and understand the value of it, and something that everybody should be thinking about, whether a new player, old player. This is something that we should all take into consideration, and that's footwear. Pretty much, as you can see, what I have here is just three pairs. Now, hundreds of options in shoes. I mean, there is boots galore. There is no end to the options that you can go with from companies from Nike, Welco, Belleville, Black Hawk, Oakley, Merrell, North Face. All these companies are in the boot business to one degree or another. Some of them didn't start that way, but they're breaking into that market, especially with the war having broken out. What we have here, first of all, is three examples of three of the main categories that I'm going to go with footwear. Now, we could say there's a fourth category, and that's the guys going around in tennis shoes. But obviously, that's wrong. That's not what we want. We can look at these three categories as good options, but evolutions also. And what do I mean by that? These all would meet the original minimum standards and what's a good choice for footwear. But each of these, as we go through them, there's also an evolution in your choice, evolution in your purchase, and evolution in what works best for you and how it works best. So that's what these three examples are right now. I have my personal favorites, and I'll explain what I'm using and like now. But remember, mission essential, mission based, mission first. And it should always dictate what matters. Luckily, footwear is one of those things that when you pick it up once, it usually can transcend very well from mission to mission, operation to operation, as long as you make the right choices when deciding on your footwear. Because if you make the wrong choice, a piece of footwear can't translate well into another environment. So let's talk about. So we'll talk about that. Also, what I want to talk about, we're going to talk about first of all, before we even go into these categories of boots, what's a good one, what's a bad one, how to find one, is the most essential part of of your boots is adequate foot care, foot protection. You know, why foot powder? If you don't use it, why should you use it? Also, socks is a consideration and something to think about when choosing what you're going to wear. I mean, remember, even your footwear is a total soldier system or a total fighter system. You know, so you think about care, wear, comfort, and how the shoe itself and the boot operates. All right. So a couple things to understand. First of all, soft cushion socks is very important. Athletic white socks are often not as good for using with boots, just because they're usually a little thinner. The cotton holds moisture a lot worse, and it doesn't dry as easily and as quickly. What the Army uses now is like a poly blend or kind of a hybrid between cotton and wool. Sometimes they play with it all the time, so this is something that's just going to continue to evolve when choosing socks. I would say this: athletic socks are not necessarily the best idea, just because for me and for people maybe if your feet sweat a lot, they tend to hold moisture longer, so your feet stay wet longer, and that's not good. People sometimes go with the heavy wool socks. Well, if it's cold outside, that's all right. But then remember, that heavy wool sock is also a sponge, so it's going to suck in all that moisture and be heavy on your foot. And once again, it stays wet longer. So you kind of want to find a light, happy medium between. I know some guys rock the Under Armour socks and some lighter hybrid type stuff, but I mean, not everybody can afford socks that might be that expensive. So often, it's just the best choice to go online and order some nice GI issue socks. I mean, they work, they do the job, and they're comfortable. Or some good light outdoors hiking type socks, and those type of retail locations are good to choose from too. So either way, it works. You got to play with socks to really find the best ones. I would just stay away from, like I said, the sports athletic type socks and the tube socks basically, and I wouldn't go too heavy on the extreme thick wool socks unless you're playing in an extreme cold weather environment, and then they might be a little more called for at that point. But take that into consideration. You know, play with your sock choices. It also affects the fit of your boot. You know, you don't want something that's really loose. You don't want something that's really tight. When it's really loose, there's a lot of movement around and it can be uncomfortable. When it's really tight, it can feel like it's cutting off the circulation. So it's important to understand that with your socks also. It can change your boot size. Foot powder, essential. Everybody should have this in your gear. It should be part of your equipment when going to any op and any weekend of play. Adequate foot care is something that's been shown and proven in combat with real soldiers that it makes a difference in keeping the soldier active and in combat and keeping you, the player, in action through the entire weekend. What happens when you don't use foot powder? What happens when you don't have adequate foot care and you're in the field for, let's say, a day or two? You know, you can get trench foot, you can get jungle rot. I mean, there's all these names for it. Basically, what's happening is your feet are inside your boot. You're sweating. Let's say you got to go through this muck or you got to go through a swamp or something as part of your op, and now your feet are wet. Your feet are wet and wet and wet, and what happens is, obviously, over time, your feet are going to start to dry. Now, as they dry, you know, your skin is pruned and it's going to start to crack your skin. And as your skin cracks, you can now develop an infection. You can now you're more prone to blisters, and you're more likely to start having foot pain and problems. Now, that's what's happening there. It's the wetting and the drying, of your feet that eventually causes what we call, you know, a jungle rot on your feet or a trench foot. That's where that kind of comes from. It's all about controlling the moisture in your feet, especially when we talk about Gore-Tex boots. It's important to understand that. So what do you do? You take your foot powder, you get your boot, whichever one kind you use, shoe, spray it in, shake it around, make sure you get a nice even layer in there. Take your sock, open her up. What I like to do is I like to kind of roll it up to where I'm down to where the foot actually is. Take a little foot powder, put it in, squeeze her in there, shake it around, and now I'll put it on. You got some foot powder inside here, which helps keep your feet dry. You got a little bit of foot powder in here, which will help absorb moisture where it can. And there you go. My feet are dry, they're clean, they're protected. I always recommend using a medicated powder. It feels nice, and it takes care of your feet. Now let's remember, with anything, you overdo it, it can be a hindrance too. So we're not going in there, we're not dumping half the bottle in there, because what happens is it gets crustied up or it clumps up and it's annoying. And you're kind of defeating the purpose of it. Just quick squeeze inside the boot, quick squeeze inside your sock, put them on, and you're good to go. And already here you are, your feet much better taken care of, and you're much more combat effective. You know, what's worse? I mean, what can be worse than going to an op, your feet get wet and damp, you don't have socks to change into, you know, so you don't have socks to change into, and your feet are wet, and now you're miserable, and your feet hurt that much more because, you know, you're now starting to get them wet and dry, and they're feeling uncomfortable because of that. You know, you're not going to lose a foot at an op with this, but you are going to be extremely uncomfortable and could potentially give yourself an infection when your skin cracks and something else happens. So let's avoid that. Let's keep you combat effective. Let's keep you in the game, and let's keep you comfortable. All right? So remember that. So what do we know? Basic foot care. Foot powder. Essential. Everybody should have it. Adequate socks, and the appropriate type of socks. A lot of that is something for you to figure out and feel out. Standard GI issue socks, they work. Guys may say they don't like them. Some guys say they love them. I'm fine with them. They work. They do the job. And having extra pairs of socks, because if you can, and you get the opportunity to in battle, there's a lull, there's a break. You're overnight in your OP, you know, or in your base, and you want to swap socks out, swap them out and get them fresh. You know, powder can only do so much. Sometimes you have to swap them out, especially if they've been submerged and you got like water in your boot. You're gonna have to you gotta swap your socks out at that point. No amount of powder is gonna help you there. Powder is to control the moisture from you sweating, not you stepping into a bog. All right. Now that we've talked about foot care, which is I think one of the important highlights, we're going to talk about boots. We're going to talk about selecting a correct boot. Here we have 3 different boot examples for you to look at. The first category is our more or less standard classic leather boot design. These are a jungle boot model. Many of you see these in the surplus stores. We love them because they have that wonderful green mesh on the side gives it that cool Vietnam era style. These are Ripple sole, but they come in all other kind of soles. Ultima makes them. A whole bunch of other companies make them. I believe these are old Rockies. I can't remember the model exactly. And these are a hot weather boot. What characterizes a hot weather boot? Mesh sides, not like the full leather, and a nice mesh side that allows for ventilation, along with holes on the inner side of the foot. These are for, you're going to step in water. All right. With these, you can't help getting water into them because they're not Gore-Tex. So that helps, one, ventilate your foot, helps water move in and out. It's all about ventilation with hot weather boots. For a lot of people, these are going to be your first introduction, your first. This is where usually people go first with boots because it looks classic, it makes sense, it looks cool. We want that Vietnam jungle look. I've worn them, I've used them. There are days where I really like them, and then there are days where I hate the hell out of them. And anybody that's worn these old style boots will understand that. And these are what I was wearing when I first joined the Army before ACUs came out. So, I didn't have a choice, but I know better now. Your next category will be your standard issue combat boot now. These are a little more modern. These are Welcos. I personally prefer Belvilles when it comes to actual combat boots. I wore a set of Belvilles in Iraq, and those are hands down my favorite boots. They are not fancy, they're not Converse, they're not Oakley boots, but once they were broken in, they were like sneakers. Same thing with these Welcos. Issued. These are also a summer model. Once again, because you can see the mesh on the outside, ventilation on the inside of the shoe, on the inner part of it. We do get issue winter boots, but most infantrymen, and that's not all, because there are exceptions. Most infantrymen, we choose to always wear summer boots year round, whether it's cold or not. We may wear a little thicker sock, but that's because we're of the philosophy that it's lighter, more comfortable, and if we get our feet wet, we get a chance, we're going to change our socks. The thing with Gore-Tex boots are, they don't have any ventilation on the side. So your foot's going to be hotter inside. And with these style boots, you can see how it wraps around, comes up high, 10 inches at least. These boots tend to get a little warmer inside of them, and so long-term comfort is a little diminished in my opinion, and a lot of infantry guys will choose when they were deciding. These are also more flexible, so lighter is always better. That's why a lot of old school infantry guys and a lot of guys even now will say that they kind of stay away from their winter issues because of that. I mean, they're great, especially for guys that have to operate in winter conditions all the time. But I've only ever used my winter boots once, and that was when I was doing extreme cold weather in the northern islands of Japan. That's the only time I've ever used extreme cold weather boots. Other than that, summer combat boots. Now you can get boots, and these boots are pretty popular. Everybody's rocking the more modern look, so people are swaying away from the leather and moving into the suede. Easier to take care of. You don't have to polish them, and not many airsoft just polish them anyways. And guys are going with Converse, which is really popular. Rocky's really popular. The Oakley boots, Nike's into the boot game. Blackhawk, all those guys are in the boot game. There is not one better brand than the other. Boots are like anything, are very important in the sense that you have to explore the options and see what works for you best. What's more comfortable, which one has the wider soles for it, which one has the best traction for them, and which one has the best soles and the best ventilation. The upgrade that you see mostly, the difference between these boots and the old style boots, especially when you're looking at old ones, especially when you're looking at standard issue types, is that these boots right here don't have a Vibram sole. This is just a hard, rubbery plastic sole that was designed, which is good and all. Especially these Ripple soles are really good for sand and that type of ground. But other than that, the traction's a little crappy sometimes. But what I mean by Vibram soles is what you have here now in the standard issue boots. They'll say Vibram on the bottom. Sometimes they'll say Vibram on the side when it comes to civilian models. But Vibram produces one of the best soles in the world, if not the best sole in the world. The wear rate is slow. The comfort is there. The flexibility is there. Also, as it gets colder, plastics and the soles of older style boots, and even like construction boots that aren't Vibram soled, tend to get a little stiffer because of the cold weather, and the traction isn't there because there's not that grippiness isn't there. Let's put it that way. Vibram soles are designed a little better that way, to where even in cold weather, it doesn't get that hardening effect as easily. So I feel like there's more traction when it comes to these soles over the life of their use, and then depending on the environment, that doesn't change. So you still got a good solid sole that gives you that grip that you want out of Vibram. It's important for guys, especially that wear them and use them a lot. Wear rate is much better with Vibram soles. So it's something to always take into consideration. Vibram soles is going to be my first prerequisite when buying any boot, and it should be your first prerequisite too, because they are the best. And it's ideal it's the ideal sole for you to be using in your boots. If you're not using Vibram sole, you're just not getting the best out there for your feet. I've used Blackhawk shoes, like nice brand Blackhawk hiking shoes. They weren't Vibram soles. I bought them because they said Blackhawk on them, and they're really nice and light. Soles worn in 6 months. You're wearing them every day. That's how quick they wear. Years. Still really good traction. I'd say there's 75% still on these soles. And I've had these for years. In comparison to the Blackhawk soles that weren't Vibram, that were done in 6 months. The back was already getting messed up. Alright? The next evolution, and where you're starting to see a lot more players go to now, especially with the athleticism of the sport, even soldiers down range, Rangers, Special Forces, for those of you guys that are always looking for that look, the alternative is now becoming, and the boot of choice is becoming something like this right here. This is a Merrell. What is it called exactly? A Moab Mid. Sorry, I didn't remember the name. And you're seeing a lot of operators, and you're seeing a lot of soldiers now. You're seeing a lot of more athletic players that move fast, want to be flexible and react. Choose something like this right here, because the ankle's a little lower, which makes it a little more flexible. Now, when you don't have it the lower you go, the more ankle support and leg support you kind of start taking away. You know, I wear a low-cut version as my everyday shoes. I will sometimes wear them to play, but it depends on the terrain. If I'm going to be playing in mount or indoors where I'm just want to be quick and flexible with my ankles and my feet, I might wear the lows. But I always recommend that you have this a minimum of what you got here is, I believe, 8 inches of ankle support, and then 10 inches is ideal for a regular boot. That's usually the standard for the military. Now, special units have special privileges and do things a little differently. What I like about these boots, like I said before, Vibram sole, ideal. It says right there on the side. You got the Vibram stamp on the bottom. These boots are also Gore-Tex. Why do I use Gore-Tex in these and try and stay away from Gore-Tex in these? Because these are heavier. For some reason, these are always heavier when they're wrapped in Gore-Tex. These kind of have like a Gore-Tex lining on the inside, but the boot itself all around is very light. So it's much smarter to go back and choose it in this one. Are your feet going to be a little warmer? Yes. But I've shed all the weight of the heavy sole, because this is heavy compared to this. I've shed all that extra Gore-Tex because the heel is, because the area around your ankle and your leg is down much shorter. So when you shed all that weight, you can take back that perk of having Gore-Tex on your boot. So when you go to choose yours, first rule, Vibram sole gives you the best grip, lasts the longest time for me. That's my personal experience has shown that. Gore-Tex, because if I'm going to be trudging through swamp, I'm going to stepping through a puddle or a lake or whatever, it'll keep my feet drier longer. And the fact that they're lighter, comfortable, they ventilate very nicely, means that they'll dry faster and they won't slow me down. This is a very like athletic choice nowadays, and it's honestly probably one of the most ideal choices. The military is, as you can see, is pushing in that direction. Players are pushing in that direction, and it's really the best choice. I know right now that some guys are saying, and like I said, I'm not a Ranger, and I don't talk to too many of them, but I can check with some guys that I know. They're using the Merrell Ripsaws, I believe they're called. Correct me in the comments if I said it, if there's something else. Ripsaws. That's the Merrell model that a lot of them are using now. So for those of you that are big into, you know, going with whatever those guys are rocking immediately, that works. I like these, and I chose these particularly, like I said, for some good ankle support. My number one criteria, Vibram soles. Number two, Gore-Tex. Gore-Tex. And I just like the traction pattern on these. It's important, you know, you want something that grips pretty well. I like it for it to have a little, you know, I like it to be able to catch on the side a bit, because, you know, you can get in some awkward places and you know, you're really struggling with your foot. With boots, the drawback becomes sometimes is that the edges are just like smooth and even all the way across. So sometimes it's a little weird if you're not flat to try and get your traction and get yourself a good grip. But in the design of these hiking boots and these shoes, you know, you can get yourself a good traction no matter how the foot is kind of oriented and working. You know, a little good traction in the front, nice big good traction in the back. Very, very flexible, very simple to maneuver with. You don't want to go so light. I know there's plenty of guys out there that are like, oh, I wear these ultralight ninja style shoes. And what happens with that is that, you know, you want give in your toe. You want that give, because what it's doing is it's protecting your foot at the same time. When you go ultra light, like almost like runner type shoes light, there's no give in it. And your foot's exposed to the possibility of more danger and damage easier. So you got to play that balance. You know, you got good flexibility here, but it resists. You got almost no give here. All right? So let's find that happy medium in choosing and deciding our shoes and what footwear we're going to use best for combat. I know it looks cool. I know it's classic. And some say a classic never fades. But you know what? We got to evolve past these. I know these go for about 30, 40, 50 bucks, depending exactly what kind. If you go some like real old school models, you get like these for 25, 30. Don't do that to your foot. I know there are old school guys out there, they're going to be like, oh, I love my old school Ultimas. Yeah, well, you know, I grew up and decided that I think I needed something different, you know. Foot comfort's important, especially when you're going to be on your feet all day long. Standard Army issue nowadays, modern standard Army issue. They're great, they work, they are an improvement. But once again, they can still be a little bulky. And if you think about it, and I pick on Ultima a little bit because in the Army we always said they made the cheapest shoes. Now that they've upped their game a little bit, they've added some nicer lines. But the standard Army Ultimas issued were a little on the crappy side too. Once again, they weren't Vibram soles. So when you're going to pick Army issue, that's fine. If you're looking at those Welcos and those Bellevilles and all that, that's okay. Make sure you get your Vibram soles. All right, they're going to last you longer. They're going to work better for you. They're more reliable, and you're just going to be happier when it comes to your combat shoes and proven shoes. Camouflage. Let's talk about that really quick when it comes to camouflage. Black, suede, light tan, brown, a dark brown. Camouflage in your shoes is one of these things that, you know, we can argue about. I know guys out there are buying the multi-cam ones, and now they make ATAX camo in your footwear. Man, when you step into a big pile of crap, that's the color of your boots afterwards. So, you know, once they get a little character to them, you know, from being in the field somewhere, it doesn't matter. So, those of you guys spending extra money on multi-cam boots so they match your multi-cam gear, what's the point? You know, you're gonna get mud and all that. Save your money. Put it into some good socks. Put it into a better boot that you could have bought if you didn't, you know, settle for the boot that matched your gear. Think about all these things and keep that in mind. You know, wear rate of your soles is very important. Proven, trusted. What I very much enjoy now, like I said, an athletic mid-level boot, a hiking boot with, once again, Vibram soles, Gore-Tex outside, because now I can embrace it since I've gotten rid of a little weight on the boot, and the material has become lighter. Now I can take that back. I get it brown so it kind of blends, but once again, once I cake it, it doesn't matter. All right, so let's keep those things into consideration. So, summary: footwear, foot care. Before you rush out to pick a boot, make sure you think about your foot care. when you go into action, before you go into action, before you put those boots on in the morning, think about your foot care. Did I put me some good powder inside my boot? Did I put some powder inside my sock? Did I, are my feet dry and clean? Because if your feet are moist and wet when they go into your boot, they're gonna be wet longer. And then if they dry, they're gonna dry because they soak onto your sock. So now you got a wet sock. Don't do that to yourself. Extra socks. If you're gonna be out in the field for 3 days, I carry 6 pairs of socks. That way you have at least one pair to swap into every day, in case of worst case scenario. And what happens after you run out of pairs? Well, I don't know what to tell you. You're in trouble at that point. I'll tell you what you can do. We'll go old school with it. If you're out of socks and you're down to your last pair and you've got another pair that's wet, throw those suckers around your neck and let them dry. I know it's crazy because if you put them into a pouch, you're not going to get air to them. People are like, well, if you're going to be sweating, you're going to get sweat all over them. Yes and no. Okay. What you do is you tie them together at the top because they're not wet and sweaty at the top, around your shoulders, and boom, my socks are air drying. They smell like crap. They're right next to my nose. You know what this reminds me? To bring extra socks next time. You may look like a goofball, but at least you'll have dry socks later on. And that's only for you hardcore, 2-day game player kind of guys. So not for everybody to do, but that is the old Army answer to that problem. And they have an answer to everything. So foot care. What are our categories of shoes? Old school leather, modern Army issue or modern Army standards, because all these companies now are making them within the Army standards so they can try and sell them to soldiers. And then the more modern, the more progressive choice now is that's a light hiker, more athletic choice. This mentality comes from a combination of the athlete, hiker, and soldier. This system is designed strictly for the soldier and Army issue. This model was Army issue, Army thought, but 30, 40 years ago thought, not modern day thought. All right? So if we're going to make a choice, let's stay away from the really cool Army old school looking boots that you're going to regret down the road, even though you may look good for a day in them. Think more modern. Make the right choices when choosing your modern type issue. And start thinking about a progressive change. Moving over to something more athletic, more comfortable, more long lasting. And something that'll provide your feet better care in the long run. Alright? So I hope this helped you guys out. At least, narrowed the choices down and choosing and making those proper decisions. Any questions, feel free to comment below. Please like the episode if you did. Remember to check out our Facebook, Twitter, all that good stuff, and like us all there. And if you have any questions or comments, please put them below. The only way we can improve and do this better is if you guys comment for us, okay? This is Javier, Dark Horse. I'll talk to you guys next time.